Let's say you're building a workflow using Power Automate, and inside this workflow, you have a list of items that you get from any data source. SharePoint, Dataverse, REST API, Custom Connect, whatever, doesn't matter. Now you have an array of records that you want to do some calculations on it, something like data summary, for example, grouping, creating total, or anything like that. And Power Automate by itself doesn't provide any one of that. Of course, there are third-party components that you can buy them separately. They are usually very cheap, and they will do the job for you. But let's say in your company, they are in rush until they get approval for that extra license, and all those, let's say, paperwork takes time, and you are in rush for delivering your project. And now you want to do something really quick. So this is what you can do inside Power Automate to get this done. We have a list of items, and I want to group them by username, and I want to calculate the total of the minutes in our duration field for every single user. This is not an ideal solution. I'd rather do it in a much better way. When you have large number of records, Power Automate is not made for this. Keep all these things in mind in case you want to implement it in a real project. So let's get into it and enjoy the show. Let's start with our setup and see what we have for this video. I created a flow with a manual trigger, so you push a button so everything will work. I created two variables. One of them is user duration list. The other one is user duration summary. This is our input. Whatever we do should go into this variable. They are both arrays. And finally, after we are done, I put the content of this variable inside compose. So we will examine and see what we got as a final result. Let's take a look at the project. This is a flow that I created. I called it grouping records in Power Automate. As I mentioned, we have a trigger, no parameters, nothing. Inside the first variable, I call the variable user duration list. The type is array, and the content that I put inside it is something like this. It's just a string that represents a JSON array with square brackets. User, user A, user B, user A, user C. So it's a mix of user A, B, and C. And the duration in minutes, we have like 200, 100, 130, and that's it. The other array that we have is empty, there is nothing in it, and the result of our work should populate and put the content inside it. Our goal is to produce something like this in the user duration summary out of this content that we have in user duration list. But how are we going to do that with just basic actions that we have inside Power Automate? All right, before we really get into this video, I want to mention that this video is packed with formulas, expressions, data operations that they are typical in Power Automate. If you're not familiar with this video may make your head spin. So if you feel like that, there are two courses that I have on Udemy. The first one is JSON Crash Course. I will put the link in the description. That's a free course, which is basically the core of working with expressions in Power Apps and Power Automate. The other course is Master Power Automate Expressions in 2 hours. I also put the link in the description with the free course coupon that I put it somewhere on the screen, and it is valid only for 5 days after this course. So if you're a lucky one, enjoy it. If you're not, still there is a course discount voucher in the course description. Check it if you are interested. Now let's get into work. There are 4 steps that we need to take. First, we need to get the distinct list of users. I create an array of strings, which includes user A, B, and C, or whatever else the user that you can find in the initial list. Then, I want to go through every single user and filter the user duration list, the initial list that we had, based on this user so that I can calculate the sum of duration based on that. Then this list goes to the next step, and I need to calculate the total that I can simply use any loop or apply to each action to take care of this. After every record is calculated per user, I will add it to the user duration summary. Because it's an array, I can simply use append to array variable action, and this will do the trick for us. Now, let's get to work. We start with the first one, which is get a distinct list of users. To get a distinct list of users, we go back to Power Automate, and I need to navigate through all the items that they are coming from this array, which is user duration list, and I want to feed it into an apply to each. So I would say apply to each. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. It's looking for an input. The only input that we have at the moment is this one, user duration list. So I click on this guy, and user duration list is here, right? I really don't like this UI. Let me just reduce the size a little bit. Probably we will see better. All right. And this apply to each, let me just rename it properly. And I want to call it get distinct users. Distinct. And obviously, when I create a distinct list of users, I need to put it in a variable, but I cannot create variable inside apply to each. I initialize another list here. I say add an action. Initialize variable. There we go. The name is going to be distinct user list. And I also get a copy of it, and I rename the action so I can easily find, track, and maintain it. This one, again, should be an array. I don't put anything inside it. As I pick the users inside this loop, I will add the users one by one to that one. Every user that this guy reads, I need to check if it is in this array or not. Obviously, the first user that I pick will not be found here because this list is empty, but after that, it will check. Regardless, we check from the very beginning. I need to use a condition. I pick the condition here. And I want to say, if that distinct user list does not contain the current user that is being processed, add it to the list. Otherwise, skip. This is how we do it. I click on this guy, and I pick the variable distinct user list. And instead of equal, I say it contains. And now I want to get the user of the current item. Here is a little bit tricky. When I click on this guy, I can pick the current item here, right? But this guy is not going to help me. I want it to look like a formula. Let's see if I click on this guy, it brings it here, which is not going to be helpful for me because this one is a record like this, which I don't want all of it. I want whatever the whole record is, dot user. So instead of current, I want the formula of this one that most of the time people cannot recall the formula. Here's a trick. To work with it, I need to have the formula shape of it in an expression. So I click on the expression, just like before. I go here, I put a space here. So whatever that I add here, now it looks like a formula. I click on dynamic content, and then I scroll down to the very end, and I do not find anything. Why? Well, because Power Automate thinks that it's smarter than us. Big mistake, but we know how to go around it. The simple trick is just ignore this guy for a second. Assume that it's not there. Just collapse this condition. I get the current item and put it inside a compose because we cannot use a variable inside it. So I just add another action here. I would say compose. And bingo. But I want this compose before this condition. Just drag and drop the condition and put it after compose. Now, this compose can contain the current item. So I just rename it to current record of initial list. All right. I bring it here. Now I can easily add this current item to this one inside this compose. Just make sure there is no space or anything before or after that. We're good. Now, if I go to the condition, I can say when distinct user variable contains this compose that I can easily refer to under expressions. I click on the expression. I push one tiny space here, then I go back to dynamic content, and now if I scroll down, you will find the output from the current record of initial list. I click on it. Don't forget to remove this space from the beginning. We just use that to trick the designer. Now, after I have that, I can say dot, I'm looking for user. Of course, the IntelliSense does not find it, so don't worry about it. Just type, trust your typing, and click OK. So now what happens is that this condition returns true if this user list contains the current user that we are trying to look for. If not, we want to add it. So yes, we just ignore it. If no, add an action, and I want to add it to the list of distinct user. Distinct user is an array, and now I can add a string to an array. And I look for append to an array variable. Remember, we were building an array of strings. I click on this guy, and the array that we want to add this user to is going to be distinct user list. And the value that we want to add to it is going to be exactly the same thing that we added here. So I click on this guy, I copy the expression, I come back here, do not paste it here directly. When the value is selected, click on the expression, because what we have is expression, not something visually understandable. So I just paste the expression here, and I click on OK. Now, after this job is done, after this loop is complete, it should have a distinct list of users in a variable called distinct user list. Let's examine and see what's going on here. This compose, we don't need it at the moment. I just use it to put my distinct user list and see if I got it right. So let me just save it, and I test it. Manually test, run flow, done. Okay, it's running. You see how long it takes to complete? That's why I don't like this approach. Anyway, I click on compose, and now I have user A, user B, user C. Step 1, complete. Now, for each user, I need to filter the user duration list. So I have the username. I should use a filter action to get the initial list and filter it by the user that I have a distinct list of them, one by one. So I go back here, I click on edit. I don't need this compose at the moment, but after I get the distinct user, I want to use another apply to each, and I want to say apply to each. I add it here, and this one is going to be rename calculate total. Every item that comes here, now it's coming from the distinct user, because we need to do the calculations for every single user one by one. You want to make your life a whole lot easier when you're working with expression. Always keep it as an advice. Every time that you get into a loop, if you want to work with the current item, put it in a compose action, and after that, writing expressions is a whole lot easier. So I come back here again and calculate total. I want to add another action right in the beginning. I add compose, and I add this guy here, this compose. Let me just rename it. It's going to contain current distinct user. And the content inside it, just like before, I get it as the current item from the calculate total, which is this loop that we're working with. So I have the current user, I have the users one by one. At the moment, I really don't need to filter anything or write any other weird expression, because this guy, every item represents one user as a string, which is great. Now I come back here. I want to filter this guy, user duration list, by the user that I have. Filter. Yes, inside Power Automate we have filter. Scroll down, filter array, and this time I want to rename it to filter list by user. Okay? The array that I want to filter is going to be user duration list, the big list that we had in the beginning. the filter condition that I have, I want to make sure that the current user, this is the current distinct user, equals to the items inside this list that the user is, for example, user A, or whatever that the current item is in that apply to each. So I come back here and I write another expression here. I use item, which refers to current item in the filter expression, and I say dot user, because I want to compare the username that I got from that distinct user list to the user of every single item, and if it is matched, filter should show it. So if I click on OK, we are good. Let's save and test it quickly just to make sure we are on the right track. All right, let's test it. Test, run, flow, done, and it's gonna work. Now see what we got. Let me just expand it and filter list by user. For the first iteration, the current user is user A, and this filter returns user A, user A, user A. Everything is user A, while the input includes all the users. Great. So we completed this step, and we have done it for all the users. Look at that. If I go to next, all of a sudden I have everything for user B, and if I go to the next step, I have everything for user C. We are getting closer. Now we need to calculate the total duration for every user, which is easy. When I have a list of one single user that includes all the durations, I need to iterate through everything and add them to one variable. A variable, sure. Because it's variable, I gotta add it somewhere in the beginning. Let me just click on edit. But this is a temporary variable, so I use initialize variable. And this initialize variable, the variable name is gonna be temporary sum. The type is gonna be integer. And the initial value of this, it should be 0, but it doesn't really matter because we have to reset it every time that the loop goes for a new user. So let me just scroll down, and in the calculate total, right after I get the user, I want to set variable. And the variable that I want to set is going to be temporary sum, and I want to set it to 0. All right, I'm not sure if I renamed it. Yeah, I didn't. So temporary sum, let me just rename this guy and just add this guy here. Great. So let me just save it again before we lose the work that we have. And we go down. So when I have the filtered list of the items by user for every single user, the job is very easy. I just need to add another apply to each, right? And this applies to each. Let me just rename it to calculate per user total. And the value that I want to get from this guy is the output from this filter, because now this loop should go through every single item for the current user that we filtered the initial list based on, all right? So the filter that I have is called filter list by user. I click on this guy, I go filter list by user, and I pick the body, which is an array. Just like before, I add a compose here, compose, and I put the current item inside it because I want to work with the formula. So rename it. I call it per user current item. And I want to put the calculate per user total current item inside it. I scroll down here. Scroll down. Calculate per user total. Just make sure you pick the right one. Calculate per user total. I get the current item here. I need to add the duration of the current user to the temporary variable that we had. that variable was an integer, right? So I have something called increment. If I scroll down, you will find it here, increment variable. I can say, rename it to add duration to temporary total. The name, it's going to be temporary sum, and the value that I want to add is the current item, which is per user current item, dot duration. Again, the same trick. I click on variable. I go to the expression. I put one space here. I go back to dynamic content. Scroll down, and I will find this guy, per user current item, and I put the output here. Dot duration. And don't forget to remove this space. Duration, properly typed. I click on OK, and I click Save. So far, we calculated the duration sum, but we need to create this record and add it to the user duration summary. How do we do that? Just like this. So calculate per user total is complete. Now, right after that, I use append, because remember, this guy is an array. I can append one record to an array for every single user. So I bring it back here, append to array variable. I rename it, and I can say add record to duration summary. I pick my user duration summary, and I create that record here just like this. The user is going to be, I put double quote in front of it. The user is going to be the user that we are working with it inside this calculate total, which is going to be current distinct user. So current distinct user. Gosh, where is it? Current distinct user output. Right after that, I would say duration sum, and the value, don't forget these double quotes. I put the cursor right inside the double quote, and the duration sum is going to be my temporary variable, which is going to be the temporary sum. And just make sure I reset the variable in the beginning. So every time we set it to 0, fantastic. And now all we need to do, this compose, I remember we put the distinct user list. Let me just remove it and put the final result inside it, which is going to be user duration summary, just to double check if we achieved the correct result. Let me just save it. And time to test. Moment of truth. Manually run flow. Done. And that's why I don't like this approach. See, we have like not even 10 records, and it's going to take 4 seconds to do this, 4 seconds or even more than that to calculate the totals, 8 seconds. Yeah, come on. And finally, it is done. Let me click on compose and see what we got inside it. So we have user A 950, user B 490, and user C 1110. We are done, and now we have everything in a summary array. And that was it. If you enjoyed this video, leave me a comment or push the like button and let me know that this kind of content is something that you enjoy. I always welcome new ideas about the new videos. If you are looking for something that you want me to cover, leave it for me in the comment section. And I will see you soon in the next video. Thank you for watching.